She was a Major General in the U.S. military, trained, decorated, and commanding over 2,000 soldiers. But on a dusty back road in Dunlow County, one racist officer reduced her to just another black woman out of place. What happened next exposed a system built to erase truth. Watch how silence became her strongest weapon. Like, share, and subscribe now. This story will shake you. Don't miss what they tried to bury. The sun hung like a silent witness above Dunlow County, pouring its August heat across cracked pavement and bleached fields. Dust shimmered in the air, stretching across two-lane Highway 17, where time seemed to crawl. There, a black government vehicle cruised at a steady 55 miles per hour, its windows tinted, its presence unassuming. Inside sat Major General Nia Lawson, a 47-year-old veteran of 2 overseas tours, fluent in 6 languages, and trained in psychological warfare. But today, her battlefield wasn't a war zone. It was home. Nia wore a plain slate-gray blouse and dark jeans. No insignia, no rank. Her hair was tucked beneath a modest black cap, and her only jewelry was a gold wedding ring that hadn't shined in the sun since her husband died 3 years earlier. On the passenger seat lay a slim leather wallet containing her federal military ID, embossed with silver lettering and marked Clearance, Tier 1. She had driven this route countless times before, visiting veterans' centers, reviewing intelligence posts, quietly mentoring young officers stationed in forgotten corners of the South. Today was no different, until the flash of red and blue lit up her rearview mirror. A short burst from a siren cut through the air like a warning shot. Nia didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked to the mirror. A Dunlow County Patrol SUV crawled up behind her, too slow to be about speed enforcement, too close to ignore. Her pulse didn't spike. She did not reach for her ID. She simply slowed, signaled, and pulled over with the precision of someone who had done this before. Not because she was guilty, but because she understood something deeper. This was never about guilt. The vehicle stopped. Dust coiled around its tires like smoke. She placed her hands firmly on the steering wheel and rolled her window down. 30 seconds passed before he stepped out. Officer Brent Halder. White. Mid-30s. Shaved head. Mirrored sunglasses. His boots hit the gravel with a rhythm that had more swagger than duty. As he approached, Nia registered his posture. Loose shoulders, tilted chin, a jaw tight with assumption. She recognized it instantly. This man wasn't here for a routine stop. He had made up his mind the moment he saw her skin behind the wheel of a federal car. "License and registration," he barked, voice sharp. Nia gave a small nod, reached into the center console, and offered the documents with calm precision. But Halder didn't even look at them. His eyes were locked on her face, scanning, probing, almost daring her to speak. She didn't. "You live around here?" he asked, his tone already slipping into something darker. "No," she said, her voice measured, quiet. He leaned closer, squinting at her windshield sticker. "Federal tags, huh? What are you? Some government assistant?" A crooked grin touched his lips. "Or just know somebody important?" Nia said nothing. Her silence made him twitch. He straightened, turned slightly, then gestured for her to step out of the car. She obeyed. "What's your business in Dunlow?" he pressed, eyes narrowing. "Traveling to a Veterans Services office," she replied. No extra words, no defiance, just the truth. But Halder didn't want truth. He wanted permission to disrespect, to dominate, to humiliate. He stepped forward, standing barely a foot from her. "You think you can just drive around here like you own the place?" he muttered. "Black folks from cities don't belong out here." The insult landed not like a punch, but like a test. one Nia had faced too many times before. She didn't flinch. Her back remained straight, her breath even. That angered him. With no warning, he pulled her wrists behind her back and slapped on the cuffs. "You're under arrest for suspicious behavior and failure to comply," he announced loudly, loud enough for the grocery clerk across the street to hear, loud enough for a teenager on his bike to stop and stare, loud enough for power to echo. The cuffs clicked, metal biting skin. Nia winced but said nothing. She didn't resist. She didn't explain who she was. She didn't flash her ID or pull rank. She let the injustice breathe in public. She knew what he was trying to do, and she refused to give him the satisfaction of fear or outrage. "You've got nothing to say now?" he sneered. "Thought so." As Halder shoved her toward the back of his patrol car, a figure across the street raised a phone. A 17-year-old named Trevin James, waiting for his cousin outside the corner store, lifted his device instinctively. He'd seen traffic stops like this before. He'd seen people talk back and vanish. But this woman wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She stood tall, even as she was pushed into the back seat. Something about her felt wrong for the role he'd seen too many times. Something didn't add up. He hit record. Officer Halder never noticed. He was too busy talking, too busy gloating about keeping the county clean, too busy pretending the calm woman in his custody wasn't unraveling the very system he hid behind. Inside the car, Nia looked out the window, her gaze steady, her hands bound, her future uncertain. But her silence carried weight. And her mission, though unspoken, had already begun. That moment, that click of the cuffs under a summer sun, marked not just a violation, but a mistake. Because Brent Halder didn't arrest just another woman that day. He arrested a major general trained in intelligence, discipline, and quiet disruption. He arrested a strategist. And he did it in public, with a partial video rolling and witnesses watching. By the time Halder drove away, the video clip had already uploaded. 39 seconds of footage that would tear open Dunlow County's darkest secrets. And in the back seat, Nia Lawson closed her eyes, not in defeat, but in preparation. She had been trained for war. This time, it would be fought without weapons. Only silence, only truth, and the world would soon be watching. The ride to Dunlow County Detention Center was silent, broken only by the low hum of tires on hot asphalt and the faint static of the radio that Officer Brent Halder pretended to listen to. In the back seat, Major General Nia Lawson sat handcuffed, her posture upright, her expression unreadable. There was no protest, no explanation, no plea, not because she had nothing to say, but because she knew the moment demanded quiet observation, not confrontation. Every second of silence was calculated. And somewhere deep in the U.S. military's restricted network, a dormant security flag had just blinked red. When they arrived, the gate creaked open with sluggish reluctance. Dunlow's detention center looked like something forgotten by time. Concrete walls browned by humidity, a flag half twisted in the wind, and surveillance cameras either too old to record or too new to be trusted. Officer Halder waved her through processing like she was just another low-level arrest. But she wasn't. And he would soon regret not checking. Inside, the intake officer, a pale, heavy-set man named Deputy Sorrell, barely glanced at Nia before muttering, "We got another non-compliant." Halder grinned and slid a file folder across the metal counter. "Didn't say a damn word. Thought she was too good to talk." Sorrell opened the folder. No military ID, no federal clearance, just a driver's license and the written report Halder had slapped together in under 5 minutes. It accused Nia of suspicious behavior, verbal hostility, and possible threat to local authority. Vague, fabricated, and deliberately incomplete. There was no record of the vehicle she was driving, no mention of federal plates, and, most crucially, no note about her rank. Nia said nothing as the cuffs were removed and replaced by zip ties. Her hands ached, her shoulders stiff, but her eyes stayed alert. She scanned everything: door codes, badge numbers, the smudged emergency exit sign half lit by a flickering bulb. She didn't need a weapon. Information was her battlefield. "Take her to the West Wing," Sorrell muttered. "Unit C, solitary." "Solitary?" The younger officer beside him blinked. "For what? She hasn't even been booked yet." She refused to answer questions. "Could be unstable. Chief says we keep her isolated until we know what we're dealing with." The word unstable hung in the air like a lie spoken too often. Within minutes, Nia was marched down a dim hallway lined with reinforced doors and buzzing fluorescents. Each footstep echoed behind her like a countdown. They passed holding cells full of noise, shouting, coughing, metal clanking against bars. But they didn't stop. At the final bend, a heavy door clicked open to reveal Unit C, the isolation wing. No sounds, no windows, just numbered steel doors spaced precisely 9 feet apart. Her room was 2C, 8 feet wide, 10 feet long. A toilet without walls. A metal bed bolted to the concrete. A vent humming just loud enough to mask voices, but never loud enough to drown out thought. There was no clock, no mirror, no sense of time. The moment the door slammed shut behind her, the room swallowed her like a sealed vault. No one told her how long she would stay. No one offered a call. No one asked for her name. She sat down on the edge of the cot and waited. Across the building, her personal belongings were bagged and tagged, but not all of them. Her leather wallet, with the embedded military chip and Tier 1 ID, was conveniently lost in the system. Her wedding ring was logged, her shoes, her blouse, but not her identity. And that wasn't an accident. Dunlow County's system was old, but calculated. Problem cases were stripped down to blanks before records ever made it to state-level oversight. When someone needed to disappear, whether a protester, an immigrant, or a quietly defiant black woman, they disappeared with clean paperwork and dirty intentions. Nia knew this protocol. She'd seen it overseas, in foreign regimes. But now, she was inside the very mechanism she was trained to dismantle. And still, she said nothing. Her silence unnerved them. 3 hours passed, then 6, then 10. Shift changes came and went. Guards peeked through the hatch and scribbled notes about non-communicative behavior. At one point, a mental health officer stopped outside her door and spoke through the slot. "Do you understand where you are?" No answer. "Can you tell me your name?" Still nothing. Inside her cell, Nia sat cross-legged on the cold floor, her hands resting calmly on her knees, her breath slow and measured. She wasn't meditating. She was triggering a fail-safe. Unbeknownst to her captors, the watch they hadn't confiscated, just a simple black military-issue piece worn upside down on her wrist, was synced to a clearance-tracked heartbeat monitor. 10 hours of silence under duress, combined with elevated cortisol patterns and isolated cell GPS, activated a signal through a satellite relay. The device pinged twice. A red icon lit up in a classified control room 200 miles away. Then, silence again. By dawn, the Department of Defense had flagged the name Nia Lawson as location undisclosed. Within 20 minutes, Colonel Wes Albright, Deputy Director of Internal Security Operations, received a coded alert marked Directive Iris Red. It meant one thing: high-risk detention of a federal officer under unknown jurisdiction. He didn't panic. He didn't call. He opened a sealed archive, entered a passcode, and launched an immediate search of recent arrests across 4 southern counties. No one listed her. That was confirmation enough. Back in Unit C, Nia slowly stood and approached the vent. She didn't know who was watching yet, but she was certain someone was. Hours later, her fabricated file made it to a regional database, stamped with new charges: resisting verbal commands, suspicious conduct, risk of inciting unrest. Her arrest time was logged as 3 hours after the actual event. Her signature was forged, and her ID still missing. They weren't planning to convict her. They were planning to erase her. But Nia Lawson wasn't a civilian lost in the system. She was a Major General trained in psychological operations, deception detection, and digital warfare. They had trapped her body, but they hadn't silenced her strategy. And while Dunlow County slept, thinking it had buried another problem, a quiet storm was already rising through classified systems, military channels, and encrypted messages routed far beyond their reach. She said nothing, but the alarm had already been sounded. The stillness inside Cell 2C was not peace. It was pressure. Thick, invisible, pressing against the skin like humidity that couldn't be wiped away. Major General Nia Lawson sat alone on the concrete bed, eyes fixed on the narrow vent above her. No clock, no light changes, only the occasional thud of boots in the hall, the click of a meal tray slot opening and closing, the silence of deliberate neglect. It had been over 16 hours since the arrest. She hadn't been questioned. She hadn't been offered a lawyer. And most critically, no one had verified who she was. That, Nia knew, was by design. In a place like Dunlow County, where the badge was often used more like a weapon than a shield, silence wasn't a void. It was strategy. The longer she was held without a record, the deeper the system could bury her. They'd already erased her ID, omitted her clearance, fabricated the file. It wasn't just misconduct, it was a premeditated blackout. But what they didn't realize was that the silence they imposed was not isolation. It was ignition. Nia's watch looked unremarkable. A matte black band, a simple analog face, no screens, no buttons. But beneath its surface, embedded just below the frame, was a micro-trigger, military issue, clearance activated and undetectable to standard security scans. She tapped the underside of her wrist 3 times, paused, then again. 3 short pulses, 2 seconds apart. The device vibrated once, then nothing. Nia closed her eyes, breathing through her nose. Her posture didn't change. Her face gave nothing away. But across the country, deep within the Pentagon's off-network cybersecurity division, a silent alarm lit up on a screen marked Tier 1 Alert. Unconfirmed detention. The alert landed on Colonel Wes Albright's desk. Wes was not the kind of officer who raised his voice or drew attention. His name rarely made it into briefings. He worked in what the military referred to as containment architecture, the invisible layer of defense that ensured key operatives didn't just disappear without consequence. And when that signal blinked from Nia Lawson's code, he didn't hesitate. He opened a private console behind a biometric panel and entered her clearance level. A confirmation screen flickered. Active signal. Location masked. Authority disabled. Translation: someone was holding her in an unlisted facility, and they'd blocked all standard federal pings. This wasn't negligence. It was cloaked intent. Within 30 minutes, Wes had built a secure shell program and initiated a covert audit of Dunlow County's law enforcement systems. The audit bypassed civilian interfaces and plugged directly into the Department of Homeland Security's traffic and surveillance backbone. Within seconds, anomalies began to appear. First, there were footage gaps, empty hours in the town's traffic cam system. Highway 17, where the arrest took place, had 3 working cameras maintained by state transportation. All 3 had their data streams interrupted during the exact window of Nia's stop. A 4-hour blackout. Not a technical glitch. Intentional deletion, confirmed by fragmented data clusters overwritten with falsified timestamps. One stream restarted with footage from a week earlier, copied and looped. Wes flagged it. Next came the detention roster. Every intake entry in Dunlow's facility for the past 72 hours showed names, booking codes, and federal background checks, except one. A file logged at 0200 hours. Female, black, name, unknown, refused. The arresting officer? Brent Halder. Charges: non-compliance, refusal to identify, suspected threat. But there was no digital signature, no fingerprint scan, no federal cross-reference. It was as if Nia Lawson didn't exist. Wes knew she was being ghosted. He leaned back in his chair and pulled up a satellite cache from earlier that day. High-resolution frames stitched from state drones flying over southern counties. On one frame, captured at 0630 a.m., he zoomed in on Dunlow Detention's rear lot. A black vehicle, low profile, federal plates blurred by motion, sat parked behind the intake building. He enhanced the plate. The registration came back to the Department of Naval Intelligence. Strategic Logistics Division. Nia's vehicle. That was all the confirmation he needed. By 0800 hours, Wes had activated a restricted chain, calling in 2 digital forensic officers and 1 military legal analyst. Quietly. No paper trails, no classified meetings, just encrypted devices and satellite-bounced communications. He told them one thing: she's inside, and they're trying to vanish her. Meanwhile, back in Cell 2C, Nia remained silent. No one had spoken to her in nearly 12 hours. Meals were left on the floor and retrieved uneaten. There was no radio, no echo of voices, only the soft mechanical breath of air flowing through the vent. She knew someone on the outside had received her signal. She knew Wes. He was quiet, methodical, deeply loyal, and he owed her his life. 14 years ago, in Kandahar, she had overridden protocol to pull him and 3 soldiers out of a collapsing surveillance outpost while under fire. She had disobeyed direct orders to do it. Wes had never forgotten. And now, it was his turn to defy orders in return. As the sun rose on the second day of her detention, the Dunlow County server logs began to pulse with hidden activity. Access attempts from unnamed federal nodes, inquiries into records that didn't exist, overwritten footage flagged for irregular compression, backup files cross-checked against mismatched officer IDs. It was surgical and invisible, until the system began to stutter. That afternoon, a senior jail administrator named Dana McClellan noticed strange behavior in the system. Freezing screens, missing files, requests that wouldn't load. She called IT, who blamed a routing error. But at that exact moment, Wes's team captured evidence that 6 other arrests, all involving black or brown individuals, had similarly vanished from state logs over the past 18 months. Same county, same pattern, same arresting officer. Brent Halder. Wes didn't say it aloud, but the implications were now undeniable. This wasn't an isolated abuse of power. It was a systemic erasure protocol, practiced and perfected by a county operating below federal visibility. They weren't just detaining people, they were unmaking them. He typed a secure message, encrypted and routed through 3 continents before it reached its destination. Back in Cell 2C, Nia opened her eyes. Her watch vibrated, once, then again. She smiled faintly. The war had officially begun. By the 3rd day, the isolation unit felt like a breathing thing, slow, stale, mechanical. Major General Nia Lawson sat still inside Cell 2C, her posture straight, her breathing steady, her mind alive with motion. Every hour of silence, every skipped question, every missing procedure, it all confirmed what she already suspected. This wasn't a fluke. This was a system. Deliberate, practiced, cold. And then something changed. It began just after midday, when the overhead lights flickered twice, an irregular pulse she hadn't seen before. Moments later, the sound of a door unlocking echoed faintly from the corridor. Not hers, someone else's. Then footsteps. Deliberate, slow, and female. At first, Nia didn't react. Movement in this wing was rare, reserved for forced check-ins or strategic intimidation. But this was neither. Her door didn't open. No new guard appeared. Instead, she heard something unexpected. The quiet sound of someone humming. Low, old, familiar. A lullaby, maybe. Southern. 2 hours passed before the slot in her door creaked open and a guard slid in her meal tray. But this time, tucked beneath the slice of dry bread and pale beans, was a folded note. One word. East Wing. Nia stared at it for a long moment, then folded it again and placed it under her mattress. She didn't need more than that. Something was happening on the other side of this building, and someone wanted her to know. The next morning, the door finally opened. 2 guards stood in the hallway. One older, one new. They didn't explain. They didn't threaten. They just motioned. Nia stood, walked calmly out, and was led down a corridor she hadn't seen since her arrival. Concrete gave way to metal grates. Metal gave way to fluorescent light. Eventually, they stopped outside a side room, marked Interview 3. Inside sat a woman with silver-threaded locks, a calm expression, and a back straighter than her age suggested. Her wrists were cuffed, but her eyes burned with intelligence. The guards said nothing. They simply left. Nia stepped in. The woman spoke first. "I'm Leona Graves," she said quietly. "Used to be a public defender. Dunlow County. Until they decided I was inconvenient." Nia said nothing. She took the seat across from her, matching her silence. Leona continued, her voice measured. "They held me here 2 years ago. No formal charges, no phone call, just like you. But I made a mistake. I talked." Nia tilted her head slightly. Leona caught the signal. "They said I was agitated, marked me as unstable. Next thing I knew, I was assigned a psychological evaluation from a county contractor, who just happened to have 24 similar cases with the same results. Paranoia, hostility, resistance to authority. Sound familiar?" Nia still didn't speak. She didn't need to. Leona slid a paper across the table. It was faded, copied too many times, but the words were unmistakable. Subject displayed oppositional behavior, including refusal to answer basic identification questions and emotionally escalated nonverbal defiance. Nia blinked. That exact sentence had been written in her file. "Word for word," Leona nodded. "That line appears in 16 different reports. I've seen them. Cut and paste. They use a script." She pulled out another sheet, this one showing 2 side-by-side excerpts. Different names, same phrases, same charges, all marked temporary detainment due to psychological risk. They don't need real charges, they just need a story. Something that sounds complicated enough to keep the state out of it. If you talk, they twist your tone. If you stay silent, they say it's a threat. Either way, they justify the box. Nia exhaled slowly, then reached beneath her waistband and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper she had been scribbling on with the tip of a food tray spork. A list of cell numbers, meal times, guard names, and vent codes. Details collected in silence. She slid it toward Leona. Leona's eyes flicked over the data. "You're documenting?" Nia nodded. Leona almost smiled. Good. I didn't get that far last time. The two women sat in silence for a long time, a kind of mutual understanding between them. Both had seen behind the mask of Dunlow County. Both had paid for it. But only now was the pattern beginning to crystallize, because patterns were the weakness of every system that thought it was invincible. After 10 minutes, the door opened again. "Back to your cells," the guard grunted. Neither woman resisted. But as Nia stood, Leona leaned in slightly and whispered, "Look for the name Harrell. He worked internal records. He got out 6 months ago. He knows where the bodies are buried." Nia didn't nod. She didn't react. But she heard everything. Back in cell 2C, she sat down and began working on a new page, tearing tiny scraps of napkin and using a mixture of water and powdered soap to mark them. One page for officer names, one for procedural gaps, one for quotes lifted directly from shared reports. Her cot became a covert archive. She wasn't building a case for freedom. She was building a strike. By nightfall, her internal count reached 27 similar phrases across 8 different false reports. The patterns weren't just unethical, they were illegal. And with each link, her strategy solidified. Don't disprove one file. Expose the template. Across the country, Colonel Wes Albright was already aligning digital records to support her findings. His cyber team had retrieved 3 backup files, hidden deep in the detention center's logs, that showed identical formatting and timestamps across arrests logged months apart. One report even had the wrong name copy-pasted into the narrative. Sloppy, arrogant, fragile. By midnight, Nia Lawson sat in the dark with a slow-building certainty. They had caged her body, yes, but they had left the door wide open for her mind. And when this fight reached the surface, it wouldn't just reveal corruption. It would shatter the illusion of authority that counties like Dunlow had built for decades. She didn't need rage. She had receipts. Time moved strangely in Dunlow County's solitary wing. It didn't pass so much as loop, repeating the same sterile hours until the air itself felt like routine. For Major General Nia Lawson, every second was filed in memory. Patterns, voices, shadows, meal delivery times, nothing escaped her attention. In war zones, you learned to listen not just for what was said, but for what wasn't. And in Cell 2C, what wasn't being said had begun to echo louder than any scream. 2 days after her meeting with Leona Graves, a subtle shift unfolded. At 0500 hours, instead of silence, Nia heard movement, soft footsteps and the scrape of rubber soles on concrete, followed by the sound of a new cell being opened across the corridor. The mechanical thud of the door, the faint rustle of clothes, and then nothing. Silence. She listened. An hour passed. Then another. Still no noise. Most detainees in solitary eventually broke the quiet, singing, crying, pounding walls, whispering to no one. But this new presence was still, measured, familiar. At midday, while the guards were rotating shifts, she heard a sound. Not words, not noise, a rhythm. 3 short taps, then 2. The same pulse she had used to activate her watch. Nia turned toward the vent and gave a single deliberate knock in return. Then silence. That night, during tray collection, the guard who slid her food glanced down the corridor and muttered, "Ford's back." She didn't react, but the name embedded itself in her mind. Isaac Ford. It wasn't until the next morning that she saw him, just for a second, through the small mesh window in her cell door. He was older than she expected. Early 60s, maybe. Slender. Shoulders hunched but not broken. His face was lined, his eyes alert, scanning the corridor with care. He didn't speak. He didn't look toward her cell, but his presence carried weight, like someone who had survived by saying less and seeing more. In the days that followed, they developed a rhythm. He would tap once in the morning. She would respond with 2 knocks in the evening. No words, just presence. A silent acknowledgement that neither was alone. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something more valuable in places like this. Recognition. Then, without warning, the peace fractured. It was the 7th day since Ford arrived. Mid-afternoon. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach, like something had been scrubbed too hard, too fast. Nia noticed one of the security cameras blinking erratically above the corridor. And then, the sound. Boots. Not the usual slow steps of bored guards, but heavy, purposeful strides. 3 sets. Her door opened. 2 officers flanked the entry, and between them stood a third figure, hooded, taller, tense. Nia stood slowly, her back to the wall, her hands open. The guards didn't explain. The hooded man stepped forward, and suddenly it became clear. This wasn't a check-in. This was an event. The man lunged. It happened in a flash, too fast for her to counter. His arm rose, something sharp glinting beneath his sleeve. A weapon, improvised, concealed. But before it could reach her, a blur moved from behind the guards. Isaac Ford. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He threw his entire body between Nia and the attacker. The blade meant for her slashed across his chest. The guards reacted late. Too late. The attacker was restrained, dragged away. Isaac collapsed in a heap against the concrete wall, blood blooming through his shirt like ink in water. Nia dropped to her knees beside him. His eyes met hers, calm and still as always. She pressed her hand to the wound, her military training kicking in. But she already knew. It was deep. Too deep. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but instead gave her something else. A look. A message. Something final. Then his head fell back, and the silence returned. The guards pulled her away. An hour later, the official story was posted to the internal server. Random altercation between inmates results in fatality. Subject Isaac Ford involved in behavioral conflict. Victim status confirmed. No further threat present. A random altercation. That's what they called it. Nia said nothing. She didn't fight the narrative. She didn't call for justice. She just waited until she was returned to her cell. And then she began to dig. Ford's name wasn't on the inmate roster from the previous week. His file didn't match his face. His arrival hadn't been processed like the others. And his attacker? Gone. No paperwork. No cell assignment. Just deleted from the grid. Nia reached beneath her mattress and pulled out the growing archive she had been assembling. Scraps of dates, incident logs, mealtime gaps, surveillance failures. But it was something Isaac had given her a day before that opened the next door. He had tapped a new pattern. 4 knocks, then 1. Morse code. The letter E. Embedded in the corner of her tray from that same day, barely scratched into the plastic, was a code. E17 Beta. She entered it on the encrypted pad concealed in her shoe. A military override device. Unauthorized, but functional. The file that unlocked stunned her. Isaac Ford. Informant. Status. Level 3. Role. Internal monitor. Objective. Observe officer protocols. Report patterned misconduct. He hadn't just been a detainee. He was a federal informant. Planted, hidden, watching, and now dead. His death wasn't random. It was precise. He had seen too much, heard too much. Perhaps he had shared too much with her. That night, Nia didn't sleep. She sat upright on the cot, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the tiny flickering light near the ceiling. The one that had started blinking after the attack. Across the building, someone was watching, but she wasn't afraid. She was ready, because Isaac had paid the price for truth. And now she would carry it forward. Not with speeches, not with vengeance, but with data, with documentation, with a strategy so airtight it could silence even the most carefully curated lie. The death of Isaac Ford didn't silence Nia. It sharpened her. Every breath she took after that moment became an act of resistance. She had watched a man die not because he attacked, but because he had seen. And in Dunlow County, seeing was a crime. 2 days after Isaac's staged altercation, Colonel Wes Albright sent a coded message through the Tier 1 back channel. Short, blunt, clear. It's time. We're opening the vault. Nia didn't flinch when she read it. She had known this day would come. Not if, but when. The vault wasn't a myth, though most in government whispered about it like one. It was a sealed federal archive established after the Snowden revelations, meant to quietly collect data from law enforcement jurisdictions deemed low visibility or highly autonomous. In other words, rural counties with a history of abuse, racism, and deep ties to corrupted power structures. It was built to store evidence, not justice, and it had remained untouched for years, buried under encryption, politics, and layers of bureaucracy so dense that even internal whistleblowers rarely reached it. But now, with Nia's signal verified and Wes's audit linking over a dozen falsified arrests to Dunlow County, the vault was unlocked. Wes didn't go in alone. He brought in Dr. Simone Reeves, a former systems analyst turned civilian watchdog. She had once been a rising star inside the Justice Department, specializing in pattern recognition across state-level law enforcement. But after she testified in a closed-door hearing about racial bias being embedded in federal algorithms, she was reassigned to a non-operational role, then pushed out altogether. Nia had heard of her. Brilliant, blacklisted, dangerous to the wrong people. Now she was exactly who they needed. Within 48 hours of activation, Simone decrypted the first layer of the vault, a tangle of compressed reports, anonymized testimonies, metadata clusters, and surveillance audits from over 70 counties across 7 states. Dunlow appeared 89 times. It had one of the highest ratios of flagged detainments lacking federal matchbacks. Translation: people who were arrested, held, but never properly logged in national systems. Ghost files. One by one, Simone unpacked them. Civilian names, officer badge numbers, incident types. The same phrases echoed like a chorus through the documents. Non-compliant, emotionally agitated, refused verbal command. The same script used on Nia, the same one used on Leona Graves, and Isaac Ford. But it went even deeper. Hidden beneath an encrypted folder marked Judicial Exceptions, Level 4, was a digital affidavit from a man named Judge Raymond Voss, a retired circuit court judge who had once presided over Dunlow's Northern District. In the file, dated nearly 6 years earlier, Voss claimed that he had attempted to escalate multiple reports of fabricated psychological evaluations, coerced plea bargains, and unlawful solitary confinement of civilians deemed inconvenient. His report had been suppressed, his clearance revoked, his name quietly scrubbed from 2 major court decisions and publicly discredited for senility and bias. The system didn't silence him with force, it used disqualification. Reading his statement, Nia felt a strange shiver. Less fear, more confirmation. This wasn't about one officer, not about Brent Halder, not even about Dunlow. This was structural rot, protected by procedure and wrapped in patriotism. It was time to cut into it. She and Wes compiled what Simone now called the Black Ledger, a classified dossier containing 32 verified incidents of racial targeting across 4 counties, each case backed by matching metadata from arrest logs, surveillance loss reports, medical intake forms, and psychological assessments using identical language. They didn't just have patterns, they had proof. Included in the Black Ledger were video footage of Officer Halder deleting traffic cam records using a backdoor login from the DA's office, documents showing altered timestamps on detainee medical exams, an internal memo from a neighboring sheriff noting, "If Lawson makes it out, our entire vetting model is exposed." They also uncovered something buried in a rarely accessed records transfer file, a case titled Subject RL, a young man, black, arrested in 2019 in Dunlow for emotional disturbance. He had been found unresponsive in his cell after 2 days of isolation. No charges were ever filed. His name had been redacted, but the attached photograph showed a 17-year-old with dark skin and bright eyes. Nia stared at the photo for a long time. It looked too much like her nephew. Too much like the future this system was trying to erase. With Simone managing the technical verification and Wes coordinating legal cover, Nia began preparing for the next phase. Congressional exposure. Not a press conference. Not an anonymous leak. A classified presentation under Section 7 of the Federal Emergency Oversight Act. It gave high-clearance military officials the right to initiate an internal national security briefing if civilian systems failed to protect constitutional rights. It was rare, it was dangerous, and she had every legal right to use it. She recorded a statement, 15 minutes long, calm, unshaken. She didn't name names for shock value. She cited evidence, cross-referenced footage, laid out timestamps, highlighted phrases. Then she closed with a single sentence. "This isn't about bad apples, this is about the soil." The Black Ledger was scheduled for delivery to 3 subcommittees: Judicial Integrity, Military Oversight, and Domestic Security Affairs. Each would receive redacted portions alongside sealed digital folders requiring retina scan access. The unredacted version would remain with Simone. The backup? Stored in 2 locations, an encrypted server under the Defense Intelligence Network, and a physical flash drive taped inside the spine of a decoy legal manual titled Ethics in Law Enforcement, stored in a library 2 counties away. Wes, always meticulous, asked her one last time, "Are you ready for them to come after you personally?" Nia didn't blink. They already did. Truth had never been enough in America. Not for a black woman in uniform, not for someone like Major General Nia Lawson. So when the Black Ledger was prepared for delivery and the vault's contents began quietly moving through secure congressional channels, the real battle didn't start in a courtroom or a hearing. It exploded in headlines, sound bites, and carefully weaponized whispers. The war of optics had begun. And this one wasn't about evidence. It was about perception. Within 24 hours of the classified material being logged for oversight review, Dunlow County officials struck back, not with denials, but with distortions. They knew what they were doing. The first wave wasn't legal, it was emotional, psychological, public. The kind of counteroffensive designed to make Nia look like a threat to the very country she had bled for. The first article appeared on a small state news site with ties to law enforcement unions. Its title was subtle but surgical. Discipline or defiance? Questions surround General's recent conduct. It didn't mention the vault, didn't mention Isaac Ford, didn't mention the erasure of dozens of civilian complaints. Instead, it focused on Nia's unorthodox leadership methods during her last overseas deployment, citing an anonymous source who claimed she had ignored the chain of command in multiple operations. It questioned her temperament, her fitness for leadership. It asked, in coded language, whether her emotional fortitude matched the standard expected of high-ranking officers. It was dog-whistle warfare, nothing overt, everything implied. And it didn't stop there. Hours later, a second piece dropped. This time from a conservative opinion blog known for echoing law and order rhetoric. Its headline was louder. General or agitator? The truth behind Nia Lawson's past affiliations. The article was riddled with falsehoods. It claimed Nia had once attended a private fundraiser tied to anti-government sentiments. It showed a photo of her at a public lecture, cropped tightly to frame her near someone later accused of organizing protests. It referenced old, declassified documents from her military file, altered and re-uploaded, to suggest she had once questioned domestic security protocols in an internal memo. Context was erased. Words were twisted. Suddenly, her quiet commitment to justice became a dangerous narrative. Is she too radical to trust? And then came the threats. Her sister in Atlanta reported a strange car parked outside her home, 3 nights in a row. Her nephew's high school principal received an anonymous tip about suspicious family affiliations. Her parents, both retired school teachers, got a letter with no return address and only 5 words written in red ink. Tell her to stop digging. Nia said nothing, not to the press, not to social media, not to the military brass who quietly asked if she might want to pause the momentum. She stayed silent, not because she was scared, but because she understood how propaganda worked. Noise was the system's oxygen. She wouldn't give it breath. But her silence didn't mean surrender. Behind the scenes, Wes and Dr. Simone Reeves launched a counter-effort. Not loud, but lethal. The strategy was simple. Don't defend the truth. Let it defend itself. They compiled a folder of raw, unedited footage recovered from multiple sources. Drone video from Highway 17 showing the exact moment Officer Brent Halder pulled Nia over. Traffic cam data reconstructed from residual memory. Cell phone footage from the 17-year-old who had recorded the arrest from across the street. This time, uncut, undistorted, with synced audio. The footage told the truth in ways no article could bury. It showed the calm in Nia's voice, the precision of her movements, the moment Halder ignored her credentials, mocked her uniform, and handcuffed her while she remained composed. It captured the smugness on his face, the silence on hers, the moment the cuffs clicked under the weight of daylight and racism. And that was just the beginning. They followed with internal logs, recovered and decrypted, showing Halder's falsified arrest report, including timestamp discrepancies and remote file deletions from the sheriff's office. Then came Isaac Ford's personnel classification, a Level 3 federal informant status cross-referenced with his fatal transfer request. Lastly, they released Judge Raymond Voss's buried affidavit, documenting the pattern of template prosecutions used to silence inconvenient voices in Dunlow and neighboring counties. But they didn't release it all at once. They leaked it quietly, through whistleblower networks, independent journalists, and encrypted civilian rights channels. Let the people tell the story. Let communities build the truth, piece by piece, without the gloss of media manipulation. And it worked. Within 72 hours, the tide shifted. A viral thread on X broke down the unedited footage frame by frame. Under the heading, "She didn't say a word. She didn't have to." A documentary editor reposted it with a caption, "The quietest rebellion I've ever seen." An ex-Marine quote-tweeted it. She outranked everyone in that room. And they knew it. Suddenly, the smear campaign looked desperate. Public trust in Dunlow law enforcement plummeted. National news anchors, once skeptical, began asking real questions. Why wasn't her military ID logged? Why were traffic cam records deleted? If she was so unstable, why is every second of footage showing her calm and in control? But the system didn't stop attacking. It couldn't. It leaked more lies, manufactured rumors, even hinted that Nia's silence proved guilt. But now, the world was watching how they were trying to break her, and the tactics looked all too familiar. And still, she refused interviews. She declined exclusive offers, turned down appearances. She didn't want to be a celebrity. She wanted the system exposed, not her story exploited. Her only public statement, issued through a civilian justice group, was a single sentence. "You don't fight noise with more noise, you fight it with clarity." Behind closed doors, she prepared her congressional statement. The real war was approaching, not with bullets or cuffs, but with witnesses, records, and a vault of truths that had waited far too long in the dark. Because if they could lie about her, they could lie about anyone. And that, finally, was something the country could see. The room was quiet, not the kind of quiet that rests, but the kind that holds its breath. Rows of polished wooden benches lined the Federal Oversight Tribunal chamber in Washington, D.C., where light filtered through tall windows like judgment itself. Cameras were barred, phones forbidden. Only the sharp clatter of shoes on marble and the hushed shuffle of papers betrayed any sign of life. Behind the bench sat 6 federal review officers, 2 women, 4 men, appointed by Congress but beyond party lines for this proceeding. The room held one focus now, the case of Major General Nia Lawson versus Dunlow County law enforcement. At exactly 0900 hours, the doors opened, and she entered. Major General Nia Lawson stood tall in full-service dress blues, stars gleaming on each shoulder, every ribbon earned, every medal real. The audience didn't murmur. They didn't need to. Her presence commanded stillness. Beside her walked Lieutenant Commander Reed Chan, a brilliant military legal advisor with a spine of steel and a mind sharpened by years of war crimes litigation. He carried a leather-bound case in one hand and an encrypted hard drive in the other. No words were exchanged as they approached the central table. None were needed. The chair of the tribunal, Judge Arlena Sims, cleared her throat. "General Lawson, thank you for your presence. We understand you've submitted a classified dossier marked under Section 7. This proceeding is now under national security seal. Please proceed." Nia stepped forward, voice clear, tone calm. "This is not a matter of vengeance," she began. "It is a matter of system integrity. The documents presented today do not allege wrongdoing. They prove it." With that, Lieutenant Commander Chan activated the projection terminal, and the screen came to life behind them. The room dimmed. A silent storm began. First came the footage, unedited, synchronized from 4 sources. The arrest on Highway 17, shown from every angle. Officer Brent Halder pulling her over, mocking her status, handcuffing her with unnecessary force. Her military ID, briefly visible on the dashboard, never checked. Her voice, calm. His tone, escalating. "Play frame 36, Chan instructed. The image froze on Halder's hand reaching for her ID, then swerving to shut the glove compartment. He didn't want proof. He wanted permission to erase her. Next came the digital evidence. Chan called it the chain of erasure. A forensic map showing the precise timestamps where Halder and 3 supervisors logged into Dunlow's server to falsify her intake report. The deletion of surveillance footage. The forged psychological form with copy-pasted language used on 17 other detainees. The data trail didn't just show misconduct. It showed a playbook. Then came the files from the vault. Documents naming over 30 previous victims, Leona Graves among them. Civil rights advocates, journalists, former public defenders, even a retired judge. Each arrested on dubious grounds, each processed without federal verification, each described as emotionally unstable in identical terms. The tribunal watched as the same language appeared over and over again. Agitated, refused to cooperate, nonverbal resistance. The words weren't assessments, they were scripts. Then the testimonies began. The first witness, Leona Graves, dressed in muted gray, her voice steady. She detailed her wrongful detention, the threats made against her license, the mental health label used to silence her in court. "I stopped practicing law," she said softly. Not because I broke the law, but because I refused to lie. Next, Malik Trenton, a former teacher arrested for reckless behavior after calling out biased school board practices. His file, shown side by side with Nia's, revealed identical language. "They told me," he said, "if I signed a plea, I could walk. I refused. I didn't walk for 6 months." The stories piled up. A postal worker jailed for a forgotten turn signal. A young mother placed in solitary after asking for a lawyer. A war veteran misdiagnosed with PTSD for refusing to confess to a made-up crime. All held in the same facility. All filed under the same codes. All buried until now. Finally, it was Officer Brent Halder's turn. He looked smaller now. No sunglasses. No swagger. Dressed in civilian clothes, collar tight, jaw clenched. He was no longer a man in command. He was a man cornered by truth. Under oath, he tried the only move left: deflection. "I was following protocol," he said. "I was told to detain without escalation and wait for classification review. I wasn't in charge of the intake process." "Who told you that?" Judge Sims asked. "My supervisor, Deputy Chief Marsh. He said Lawson was flagged." "Flagged by whom?" Chan pressed. Halder hesitated. "I don't know. I was told her record showed previous behavioral incidents." "From where?" Another pause. "From an internal intelligence source." Chan smiled coolly and clicked a button. On screen appeared the decrypted metadata log from Dunlow's server, showing who accessed Nia's arrest files, when, and how the false psychological report was fabricated. It wasn't Marsh. It wasn't some ghosted intelligence agency. It was Brent Halder himself. Chan let the silence sit. "You created the flag," he said, "then used it to justify your actions." Halder said nothing. Judge Sims leaned forward. "Officer Halder, you are aware this tribunal has the authority to recommend criminal referral to the Department of Justice?" His only reply was the lowering of his gaze. The tribunal broke for recess, but the narrative had already shattered. As they reconvened, Nia took the stand for one final statement. She didn't recite a speech. She didn't rage. She said only this: "I wore this uniform overseas to protect a system that was never supposed to exist back home. But I didn't come here to indict people. I came here to indict silence. The kind that sees injustice and does nothing. That kind is over." The audience didn't clap, but some cried. As the hearing adjourned, federal prosecutors began drafting preliminary charges against Halder, Deputy Marsh, and 2 administrators who had authorized falsified assessments. A formal investigation into Dunlow County's detention practices was announced the following morning. For the first time in 20 years, the seal of the Department of Justice would be posted on the walls of that forgotten county jail. But the reckoning was only beginning. The tribunal ended not with applause, but with consequence. Within 72 hours of Major General Nia Lawson's testimony, 4 indictments were handed down. Officer Brent Halder, Deputy Chief Marsh, Warden Kellis, and the county's civilian psychologist, all charged with obstruction of justice, falsification of records, and conspiracy to violate civil rights under federal law. News of the charges didn't break through a press release or a primetime headline. It spread the way truth often does, quietly, then suddenly. By the end of the week, Dunlow County was no longer in control of itself. A federal monitor was appointed by the Department of Justice, assigned not just to oversee the detention center, but to review every arrest, citation, and internal disciplinary report from the past 5 years. A forensic audit of the Sheriff's Department's digital records uncovered what Nia and her team had already known: systemic targeting, data manipulation, and a deep-rooted culture of coded racism shielded by bureaucratic loopholes. The story no longer belonged to Nia. It had taken on a life of its own. Protests weren't called. They formed. Outside the courthouse, in front of the jail, across the bridge where her federal car was pulled over in the midday heat. But Nia wasn't there. She didn't hold a microphone. She didn't step onto a stage. She turned down every major interview request, declined feature profiles in The Atlantic and 60 Minutes, and ignored invitations from political figures who saw her as a symbol they could fold into their narratives. She let the evidence speak. The vault's contents, now declassified in part, were uploaded to a public-facing database titled Federal Civil Oversight Archive, Case 7942A, Dunlow Pattern File. Law schools from coast to coast bookmarked it in their civil rights modules. West Point's Leadership and Ethics program assigned her case in its advanced officer training. At Quantico, her testimony became part of an internal seminar on power abuse within rural law enforcement. But still, she remained silent, because that silence was never about absence. It was power. When a reporter finally caught up to her outside a veteran resource center in late November, he asked the only question that mattered. "Why haven't you said more?" She paused just long enough to make him uncomfortable, then said, "Because what I lived speaks louder than anything I could say," and she walked away. That was the rhythm of it now. No drama, no monologues, just steps forward. Behind her, a nation followed. Across the Deep South, civil review boards received an influx of civilian-submitted footage detailing small-town abuses once shrugged off as isolated incidents. Attorneys reopened wrongful arrest cases. 2 counties adjacent to Dunlow dissolved their psychological contract evaluators completely, citing unreliable behavioral assessments tied to race. But not everything changed overnight. There were still pockets of resistance, officers claiming betrayal, county officials insisting on due process for their own. Commentators on cable news suggested that what happened to Nia was regrettable but overblown, that the military shouldn't intervene in civilian matters. But those voices no longer echoed in silence. They were drowned by records, by timestamps, by data trails that didn't lie. The Black Ledger, once classified, became a book. Buried Systems, The Dunlow Pattern and the War for Truth. Written by Lieutenant Commander Reed Chan, it chronicled every detail. It sold over 500,000 copies in 4 months. And still, Nia stayed in the background, until the day she returned to Dunlow. It wasn't announced. No entourage, no press, just her. She drove the same route as before. Highway 17. The same fields. The same dust. The same sunburned signs warning of speed traps ahead. She parked in front of the same corner store where that 17-year-old boy had raised his phone and recorded her humiliation. The door still squeaked. The soda machine still buzzed too loud. She didn't stay long, just long enough to breathe. Then, on foot, she walked, slowly, down the street where she had once stood in cuffs. This time, no one stopped her. No voices mocked her. No hands forced her back. People recognized her, but no one approached. Not because they feared her, but because they understood. Some nodded. Some placed a hand over their heart. A few lowered their eyes, ashamed of what they hadn't seen before. Nia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her walk was the statement. No guards flanked her. No allies cleared her path. She wore no ribbons, no stars, just a plain gray coat, slacks and boots. The boots mattered. They were the same ones she wore the day she was arrested. Only now, they didn't carry the weight of false charges. They carried the proof of quiet victory. A victory not built on shouting, but on standing. Not on vengeance, but on memory. As she passed the old courthouse, the one where Halder once smirked, and Warden Kellis nodded with smug satisfaction, she paused. Then she kept going. The street behind her was no longer the same, and neither was the country watching. What the story of Nia Lawson teaches us all. The story of Major General Nia Lawson is not just a story about one arrest. It's a reflection of a deeper truth about America. A woman who served her country at the highest level, who led troops in war zones and operated within the nation's most secure systems, was racially profiled, silenced, and nearly erased by a local institution that believed no one would notice. But we did. And through her discipline, her silence, and her strategy, Nia reminded us of something we often forget. Injustice doesn't begin with violence. It begins with silence. What happened in Dunlow County has happened before. Not once, not twice, but dozens, maybe hundreds of times in towns just like it. Where data is deleted, charges are fabricated, and innocent people are marked as unstable simply for existing in the wrong place with the wrong skin. Nia's story teaches us that silence is not weakness. It is a form of strategic resistance. Her refusal to shout didn't protect the system. It exposed it. We must learn from her. For every American citizen, this isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a call to watch more carefully, speak more boldly, and document what others want forgotten. Ask questions when a traffic cam goes down. Demand answers when a detainee goes missing. Share the truth when it's inconvenient. Because the truth always leaves a trail, and that trail needs more of us walking it. This case is now studied in military academies. It's taught in civil rights law. It led to federal indictments, surveillance reforms, and new oversight boards. But systemic change isn't just about institutions. It's about people like you refusing to look away. So don't. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that shake the system and shine a light where others fear to look. Like this video if you believe silence can be power. Share this video with 3 friends. Just 3. That's how movements start. Give us 4 minutes of your time to change how you see the next 40 years of justice in this country. Because Nia walked back into Dunlow not to be seen, but so no one else would have to disappear. And now, it's your turn to walk with her.